Act 1. The Offer. You're sitting in a windowless room at the FBI field office in Richmond, Virginia, when they tell you what they want. They need someone to go undercover inside a white supremacist militia operating out of rural Georgia. The group calls itself the Covenant, and they've been linked to 3 arsons and a murder the Bureau can't prove. Your handler, Agent Dawson, slides a folder across the steel table and tells you to read every word. Inside are surveillance photos, intercepted messages, and a list of names you'll need to memorize before leaving this room. The target is a man named Earl Briggs, the group's founder, a former corrections officer with connections to local law enforcement. They want you to get close to him, earn his trust, and record everything he says about the murder of a black pastor in Decatur County. You ask how long the operation will last, and Dawson says 6 months, maybe a year, maybe longer. You ask what happens if they find out who you are, and Dawson doesn't answer. He just closes the folder and says, "Your new name is Kyle Decker, born in Macon, raised Baptist, dishonorably discharged. You have 72 hours to become someone you'd cross the street to avoid. Your wife, Nadine, doesn't know yet, and when you tell her, she won't speak to you for 3 days. Your daughter, Amara, is 4 years old and thinks you work at a desk. You stare at the folder, and you realize the Bureau didn't pick you because you're brave. They picked you because you're forgettable, and in this line of work, forgettable keeps you alive. Act 2. The Legend. They build your cover from the ground up in a safe house outside Quantico. A legend, they call it, and every detail has to be airtight, because one mistake means a shallow grave in the Georgia woods. Kyle Decker has a social security number, a criminal record, 2 DUIs, and a restraining order from an ex-girlfriend who doesn't exist. He has a Facebook page with 3 years of activity, all fabricated, all filled with the kind of rage that attracts the right people. You spend 4 weeks learning the language, the symbols, the 14 words, the numbers, the hand signs, and the music they listen to. You learn that 88 means Heil Hitler, because H is the 8th letter of the alphabet, and they tattoo it on everything. You learn that a ghost skin is a white supremacist who hides in plain sight, who joins the police or the military to advance the cause from within. Your handler gives you a burner phone, a pickup truck with Georgia plates, and a 9mm you hope you never have to use. They shave your head and dress you in steel-toed boots, faded jeans, and a flannel shirt that smells like tobacco and engine oil. You look in the mirror and you don't recognize yourself, and that's the point. The last thing Dawson says before you leave is, "Don't call us unless it's an emergency." And even then, think twice. You drive south on I-85 alone, no backup, no wire yet. Just a man with a fake name driving into the belly of something he can't fully understand. The Georgia pines get taller as you cross the state line, and the billboards start selling guns and God in the same sentence. You pull into a town called Harwell, population 4,000, where everybody knows everybody and nobody knows you. That's about to change. Act 3. The Introduction. Your first contact is a man named Dale Spurlock, a mechanic who runs a garage on Route 41 and recruits for the Covenant on the side. You walk in asking about work, and he looks you up and down like he's sizing up livestock. You give him the script, dishonorably discharged, can't find work, the system screwed you, the usual. He nods slowly and says, "The system don't screw white men by accident, brother. It's by design." You agree, because that's what Kyle Decker would do. And you feel something in your throat that tastes like bile. Dale puts you to work, changing oil and rotating tires for $8 an hour, cash. And for 2 weeks, that's all you do. You keep your mouth shut, you show up early, you leave late, and you let Dale talk. He talks about replacement theory, about how white people are being systematically erased, about how the government is complicit. You nod along and mirror his language, and you hate every single syllable that comes out of your mouth. On the 15th day, Dale invites you to a bonfire on Earl Briggs' property, 40 acres of farmland surrounded by barbed wire and surveillance cameras. He says it's just a gathering, some beers, some conversation, nothing heavy. You know that's a lie, but you go anyway, because that bonfire is your way in. You drive down a dirt road for 6 miles in the dark with nothing but pine trees and your own heartbeat for company. When you arrive, there are 30 men standing around a fire the size of a car, drinking, laughing, and wearing their hatred like a uniform. Earl Briggs stands in the center, and even from 50 feet away, you can feel the gravity of the man. He doesn't look like a monster. He looks like someone's grandfather, and that's what makes him dangerous. Act 4. The Trust. Earl Briggs doesn't trust easily, and for the first 3 months, he barely acknowledges your existence. You're tested constantly, small things at first, things designed to see if you flinch. They ask you to say things that make your skin crawl, and you say them because the mission requires it. They hand you pamphlets filled with pseudoscience about racial purity and expect you to quote them back. You do, word for word, and each time, you lose a piece of something you can't name. At night, in your rented trailer on the edge of town, you sit in the dark and try to remember who you actually are. You call Nadine from a payphone at a gas station 12 miles away, once a week, never more. She asks when you're coming home, and you say soon, and you both know it's a lie. Amara gets on the phone and says, "Daddy, I drew a picture of you," and you have to hang up before she hears you break. The turning point comes in month 4, when Dale gets arrested for a DUI, and you're the one who drives to the county jail at 2 in the morning to bail him out. No questions asked, no hesitation. Just loyalty, or at least the performance of it. After that, Dale vouches for you to Earl, and Earl finally looks you in the eye. He invites you to his house for dinner, just you and him and his wife Martha, who makes pot roast and talks about her grandchildren like the world is normal. You sit at his table and eat his food and listen to him describe, calmly and precisely, why certain people don't deserve to live. He says it the way a man discusses the weather, without passion, without anger, just certainty. And that's when you understand that the most dangerous racists aren't the ones screaming at rallies. They're the ones who whisper over pot roast and believe every quiet word they say. You drive home that night and sit in the shower for 45 minutes, fully clothed, water running cold. Act 5, The Wire. In month 5, Agent Dawson authorizes The Wire. You meet him at a rest stop off I-75 at 4 in the morning, and he tapes a recording device to the inside of your belt buckle. He tells you to get Earl talking about Reverend James Odom, the black pastor who was shot outside his church 18 months ago. The Bureau believes Earl ordered the hit, but used a proxy, a member named Curtis Holt, who's since disappeared. You ask Dawson what happened to Curtis, and he says, "That's what we need you to find out." The Wire changes everything, because now every conversation is evidence, and every word matters. You start spending more time at Earl's compound, attending meetings where they discuss operations in coded language. They never say murder. They say house cleaning. They never say bomb. They say care package. You learn to decode everything, and you feed it all back to Dawson through dead drops at a storage unit in the next county. Earl starts trusting you with logistics, supply runs, ammunition purchases, and once a delivery to a contact in Alabama you're told not to ask about. You make the delivery and memorize the license plate, the address, and the face of the man who answers the door. That face will later belong to a county sheriff who's been protecting the Covenant for over a decade. Every night, you transcribe the day's recordings into a coded notebook that you hide inside the air vent of your trailer. You haven't slept more than 4 hours a night in 3 months, and you've lost 20 pounds. The mirror shows a man who's becoming the lie he's living, and that terrifies you more than the guns. Act 6, The Crack. In month 7, something shifts inside Earl Briggs' inner circle, and you can feel it like a change in air pressure. A new member named Travis Keene joins the Covenant, and from the first handshake, something about him feels wrong. He's too eager, too polished, too rehearsed, and he asks too many questions about operations that don't concern him. You realize you're not the only one who might be wearing a mask, and that thought keeps you up for 3 straight nights. If Travis is another informant, You're both in danger because two undercovers in the same group is a recipe for exposure. If Travis is legitimate and he's suspicious of you, it's worse. You can't ask Dawson without breaking protocol, so you watch Travis the way a hawk watches a field mouse. Meanwhile, Earl begins talking more openly about Reverend Odom, and what he says turns your stomach inside out. He describes the night of the murder in detail: the car, the route, the caliber of the weapon, things only someone who planned it would know. You're recording everything, and your heart is beating so loud you're terrified the wire will pick it up. Then Earl says something that changes the entire operation, something you weren't prepared for. He says Curtis Holt didn't disappear. He says Curtis is buried on the property, 20 yards east of the barn. He says it casually, the way someone mentions where they planted tomatoes last spring. You nod, and you don't react. And inside you're screaming because you're standing on a dead man's grave and smiling about it. That night, you break protocol and call Dawson from a gas station payphone at 1 a.m. You tell him everything. He tells you to stay in. You tell him you don't know if you can. He says, you're the only one inside. If you leave now, 2 murders go unsolved and 30 men walk free. You hang up the phone and you sit in your truck in the gas station parking lot and you make a decision that will cost you more than you know. Act 7. The Unraveling. In month 9, Travis Keene accuses you of being a Fed at a meeting in front of 12 members. He doesn't have proof. He has instinct. And in a room full of paranoid men with guns, instinct is enough. Earl looks at you, and the room goes completely silent, and you can hear the generator humming outside. You don't blink. You don't sweat. You look Travis dead in the eye and say, "You calling me a rat?" Travis says, "He's just asking questions." And you step toward him and say, "Then ask better ones." The room laughs. Earl laughs. Travis doesn't. You survived, but the clock is now ticking, and you know it. 2 weeks later, you find your trailer has been searched while you were out. Drawers opened and closed in the wrong order. The notebook is still in the vent, untouched, but they were looking for something. You start sleeping with the 9mm under your pillow, and you stop eating because your stomach can't hold anything down. Dawson tells you the Bureau is preparing to move, that warrants are being drafted, and that you need to hold on just a little longer, a little longer. The 2 most dangerous words in undercover work. You hold on because you think about Reverend Odom's wife, who still puts flowers on his grave every Sunday. You hold on because Curtis Holt's mother still calls the FBI tip line every week, asking if they've found her son. You hold on because if you don't, nobody will. Act 8. The Raid. On a Tuesday morning in October, at exactly 5:47 a.m., the FBI executes simultaneous raids on Earl Briggs's compound and 6 associated properties. You're not there. You were extracted 48 hours earlier, pulled out in the middle of the night by a 2-car convoy on a back road. You watch the raid on a screen at the field office in Atlanta, surrounded by agents who've been working this case for years. Earl Briggs is arrested in his kitchen, still in his bathrobe, holding a cup of coffee. Martha stands in the doorway and screams, and for 1 second, you almost feel sorry for her. Dale Spurlock is arrested at the garage on Route 41, and he doesn't resist because he's too drunk to stand. Travis Keene is arrested too, and you learn later that he wasn't an informant at all, just a genuinely paranoid man. A forensic team begins excavating the area 20 yards east of Earl's barn. 3 hours later, they find Curtis Holt's remains in a shallow grave wrapped in a blue tarp. On the monitor, you watch them carry the body bag to a white van, and you think about his mother and the tip line. 14 members of the Covenant are arrested that day. 11 are charged. 3 turn state's evidence. Earl Briggs is charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy, and domestic terrorism. The evidence you gathered over 9 months fills 11 boxes and includes over 400 hours of recordings. Agent Dawson shakes your hand and says, "You did something most people couldn't survive." You shake his hand back, and you feel nothing. Act 9. The Cost. You come home to a house that doesn't feel like yours anymore. Nadine is standing in the kitchen when you walk in, and she looks at you like she's looking at a stranger. You've been gone for 9 months, and in that time, Amara learned to ride a bike, lost her first tooth, and stopped asking when Daddy was coming home. Nadine says she's glad you're safe, but she says it the way someone reads a greeting card, not the way someone says it to the person they love. You try to explain what you went through, and the words come out in fragments that don't connect to each other. You can't tell her about the pot roast dinners with a man who ordered a murder. You can't tell her about the shallow grave, or the gas station payphones, or the shower you sat in fully clothed. She asks if it was worth it, and you say, yes, but you're not sure if that's true. The Bureau offers you counseling, and you go once and never go back, because the therapist asks you to describe your feelings and you realize you can't. You flinch when someone stands too close. You check mirrors when you drive. You clear rooms when you enter your own home. The paranoia doesn't leave when the operation ends. It just changes addresses. You wake up at 3 a.m. and reach for a gun that isn't under your pillow anymore, and Nadine sees it, and she doesn't say a word. Amara asks why you look different, and you tell her you've just been working too hard. She says, you always say that, and goes back to her coloring book. And that sentence hits harder than anything Earl Briggs ever said. 3 months later, Nadine asks for a separation. She says she doesn't recognize you anymore. You want to tell her that you don't recognize yourself either, but you don't, because Kyle Decker wouldn't say that. And some part of Kyle Decker is still living inside you, refusing to leave. Act 10, The Trial. The trial of Earl Briggs begins 14 months after the raid in a federal courthouse in Atlanta. You testify for 2 days under your real name, which is published in court records for the first time. The defense attorney calls you a liar, a provocateur, and an agent of government overreach. Earl Briggs sits 20 feet away from you and stares without blinking for the entire duration of your testimony. You describe the bonfire, the meetings, the coded language, the pot roast dinner where he described a murder like it was a recipe. You describe the moment he told you where Curtis Holt was buried, and the courtroom goes completely silent. The jury hears 400 hours of recordings, and on each one, your voice is there, agreeing, encouraging, playing the part. The defense argues entrapment. Your attorney argues survival. After 6 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberates for 9 hours. Earl Briggs is found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. He doesn't react when the verdict is read. He just looks at you, and he smiles, and that smile lives in your nightmares for years. Curtis Holt's mother is in the courtroom. She finds you in the hallway and holds your hand and doesn't say a single word. She doesn't need to. Her eyes say everything that language can't carry. Reverend Odom's wife sends you a letter that you keep in your desk drawer but never open because you're afraid of what grace feels like. Act 11, The After. The Bureau gives you a commendation and a new assignment and acts like you should be fine now. You're not fine. You haven't been fine since the first bonfire in the Georgia woods. You and Nadine finalize the divorce on a Thursday afternoon, and Amara splits her time between 2 homes. She's 7 now, and she's smart enough to know something happened, but too young to understand what. You move into a 1-bedroom apartment in Arlington and start working counterintelligence, a desk job, no more undercover. But Kyle Decker doesn't leave. He's in the mirror when you shave. He's in your voice when you get angry. You catch yourself scanning rooms for exits. You catch yourself profiling strangers based on their tattoos. You go to a barber shop and flinch when the barber stands behind you with a razor, and you have to pretend you sneezed. Some nights, you dream about the compound, about the bonfire, about Earl's voice describing murder in the same tone as weather. Other nights you dream about the gas station payphone and Amara's voice saying, "Daddy, I drew a picture of you." You keep the drawing in your wallet. It's creased and faded now, but you can still see the stick figure she made of you. It looks nothing like you. It looks nothing like Kyle Decker either. It looks like the man you were before all of this, and you wonder if that man still exists somewhere. Agent Dawson retires and sends you a bottle of bourbon with a note that says, "You did the right thing." You drink half of it alone and pour the rest down the sink because you don't trust yourself with the other half. The oath you took said protect and serve. It didn't say what it would take from you. You protected a community that will never know your name. And you served a justice system that moves on without looking back. And now you sit in a quiet apartment in a city full of people, more alone than you ever were in Harwell, Georgia. The racists are in prison. The pastor's killer is convicted. The informant did his job. But nobody tells you how to stop being the man you pretended to be. Nobody tells you how to come home when home doesn't know you anymore. You hunted monsters and you caught them. But the hunt doesn't end when the cage door closes. It ends when you finally stop hearing their voices in your head. And you haven't stopped yet.